So should I start, Ishani?
Yeah, ma'am, you can start with the session.
Okay. And should I share the PPT from my side itself? Okay, thank you so much. Can we just go to the first slide, please? I'm sorry, the second one. Yeah, thank you so much. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining on this Sunday morning. I know it's a rest day, but here we are discussing a not so very pleasant topic, but nevertheless, as it's said, when it's the need of the time, we need to discuss things so that it doesn't get late in addressing those issues. One of such issues is that of male child abuse and the POCSO provisions that we have in India. And the reason why we are here to discuss this is because, as we know, the POCSO Act, and in a while I'll tell a little bit more about the POCSO Act itself. But before going into that, the reason why we are here to discuss this issue is, as we know, this POCSO Act, it's gender neutral. Right, unlike the other provisions in the Indian Penal Code or the other acts, maybe the Sexual Harassment Act, Workplace Act, or say Domestic Violence Against Women Act, this act is the nature of this act itself is neutral. It's gender neutral. However, the question that remains is, is it really neutral in its functioning, in its implementation? What does the statistics say? Right, so these are some of the questions. So we know that sexual abuse, sexual harassment, rape, and other forms of molestation, all of them are culpable offenses, and they're punishable offenses, and they are very well mentioned in the Indian Penal Code. However, the thing to note there is that it's concentrated on women being the victim. Now, when we look at the provisions of the Indian Penal Code, we find that we do have the definition of rape, we do have definition of we have a definition of outraging the modesty of women, and many other such provisions. However, the common thing in all of them is that the victim has to be a woman. Right. Now, two questions arise over here. The first is that can the victim never be a man? Right. And now, when we are using the word man, we are using it to refer to an adult man. Okay. And the second question that arises, because with regard to the provisions that we have in the Indian Penal Code, is can the perpetrator never be a non-male? Okay, so these two questions are very important, and they are less discussed. And these questions are with regard to sexual harassment of adults, sexual harassment as an offense against the body of an adult. Okay, so why the first question is important is because most of the provisions that we have in India, be it in Indian Penal Code or be it Sexual Harassment Act, a Workplace Act, all of them are concentrated on the idea of women being the victim and men being the perpetrator. Now, these are two distinct gender biases. One which perceives that men can never be the victim. That is, men can never be sexually harassed. Men can never be raped. And because of the nature of the definition itself, right? So the way rape has been defined, it includes an act of penetration, and that penetration is perpetrated by a man on a woman, right? So this is a bit gender biased, because now we might have this question: how could an adult male be raped? Now, there are many scholars, and if not in India, in across the globe, who are of the view that this notion that men can never be raped is wrong, because the whole idea of consent involves this that revolves around these acts of sexual harassment, rape, and all of these acts of sexual nature which are against a person's consent. That idea of consent itself is the main test. That should be the main test. Now, if a man is tricked into having sex with a woman, or if a man is forced to have sex with a woman, or maybe his private parts are manipulated without his consent, he's not liking that act, but still the woman goes on with that act, that will be a classical case of sexual in making a man get involved into a sexual activity without his consent, and in that case the victim will be a man and the perpetrator will be a woman. Now, when I say these things, these might come out as provocative to many of the women across the country, because in India we know this, we are not in a situation in which we can even think of discussing these topics, right? Because 90 men rape a woman. There are cases of 90 rapes across a day, throughout a day. That's the latest statistics we have, and that's very disturbing. And we don't think that we are in a position to even discuss about men being the victim, but nevertheless, that's a truth that we cannot deny. Men can be a victim, and even if we look at it from the perspective of sexual harassment at workplace, we do see that even the even the courts have started to look at this topic more sensitively, and they have started to punish women by the way of penalty, by way of imposing penalty, women who come with false cases against men. And these things do exist. So just a kind of overview on male abuse, right? Sexual abuse against men. Now, the topic that and yeah, just a quick point before we move further. I also told that this whole gender biasness is also regarding the perpetrator. Now, the perpetrator always has to be a man when we talk about sexual offenses against women, but that isn't true with the developing scenario. Now, we do see that there are many cases in which the perpetrators are transgenders, and also the victims are transgender, so this is also an emerging area. And then we also see that many a times the perpetrators might even be a woman. Now, we have this decriminalization of homosexuality, and now we should be open to the idea of same-sex people being involved in a non-consensual sexual relationship as well, and that would amount, because of the lack of the element of consent, that would totally amount to sexual harassment, to an act of sexual harassment. And we also recently had a news in which there was there was a homosexual activist who actually drugged a woman, and she was a woman herself. She drugged a woman and she manipulated her private parts. So this is a typical case of the a typical case which calls for revisiting the definition of perpetrator, victim, sexual offense, the nature of sexual offense by and far in the Indian context. Now, this was a bit of introduction to the topic, to the lesser discussed topic of male sexual abuse against men. And this is the set, and one of the topics in this set, like a subset that we are going to discuss, is male child abuse and the POCSO Act. That's up for our discussion today. Now, when we look at the provisions, as I told in the very beginning as well, when we look at the provisions, we understand that the whole nature of this act, this statute is gender neutral. The reason being that child has been defined to include both a male and a female child, and also it is open to the idea of including transgender children as well. Any person who will be below the age of 18 will be considered a child, right? And there are several provisions in the act itself which include specific protection for children who are below the age of 16. Now, that's a thing that we'll discuss in a while. Okay, so without delaying further, I'll give you a very short background of what the POCSO Act is about, so that we can better understand why why actually are we discussing the question of male child abuse specifically in this POCSO Act, which is nevertheless gender neutral. statute. So, amongst all the provisions in the POCSO Act, we have some identified acts which are punishable, and the first one of that is penetrative sexual assault. As the name suggests, it includes penetration, and the penetration is not restricted to the penile penetration into the vagina or urethra of a woman, but it also includes penetration of a penis or any other objects into the anus of a child, and that's where it becomes gender neutral, because that hints towards penetration into a male child's body. Right. So, nevertheless, even in the Indian Penal Code, we do have the offense of sodomy, and that includes penile penetration of the penis into the anus of a man. That act is itself included in the offense of sodomy. That's very well covered in the Indian Penal Code. However, the reason why we included a penetrative sexual assault as a punishable offense in the POCSO Act is because the nature of the offense gets more heinous and more gruesome when it's perpetrated on a child who is below the age of 18 years. Right. So that's one of the first offenses that has been recognized in the POCSO Act, and the second one is aggravated penetrative sexual assault. And the only difference here, excuse me, the only difference here is that the perpetrator in an aggravated penetrative sexual assault will be someone who is looked at from the looked at as a protector, for example policemen, army men, etc., etc. Now we have seen several examples of these things in our country itself, specifically in the areas that are reeling under conflict. For example, there have been many cases reported and talked about in the Kashmir region as well, in which there have been complaints of sexual assault by the deputed a policeman in that area, and against children. Those even though those cases have not been confirmed, but does give us a reason of including aggravated penetrative sexual assault in our provision. And also we have an example of aggravated penetrative sexual assault in the child remand homes. Now we know that the children who are tried under the Juvenile Justice Act, if they are found guilty, then they are sent to remand homes and child correction homes for serving their remand period. And many a times they are sexually assaulted in that remand home and correction center, and that also amounts to aggravated penetrative sexual assault, because the person who is committing that assault is deemed to be the protector of the child, and when he is committing this act, this will technically amount to an aggravated penetrative sexual assault than a regular penetrative sexual assault. And there is a difference in the punishment of these two acts. Right. Now, then there is another act, sexual assault and aggravated sexual assault. The difference between the aggravated and the non-aggravated form being the same, that is, a person who will be committing this crime will be that the nature of him will be that of a protector. Now, sexual assault in the POCSO Act includes these acts of touching a child's private parts, or making him or her feel uncomfortable, and this very well includes touching private parts, not of not just a female child, but also a male child, and or making him or her touch the private parts of the perpetrator, or making them touch the private parts of some other person. Right. It also includes acts of physical contact with their body without their consent. And if you might want to recall, we had this whole hullabaloo and recent discussion about the very unfortunate judgment given by the Bombay High Court regarding one of the cases that was presented before the court, which involved the POCSO provisions, and the case there was involving this interpretation of this very provision of sexual assault. And the facts of the case were that there was a child, there was a female child, of course, and then there was a man who had groped her, and the court said that, and that was a very sorry state of affairs, to be honest, when the Bombay High Court very unfortunately said that this does not constitute a sexual assault because the physical contact was not established, as it is not clear if the perpetrator had removed the clothes of the child before groping her breast or not. Now, this shows that how deep we are in the need of correct interpretation of the provisions that we have, and how wrongly it is being interpreted by across the country. And this also calls for another a thing to further research upon, because it was a case of a female child, and the question there was that we don't even know whether her clothes were removed before touching her breasts or not. Now, imagine if the same question was before the court, and the victim was a male child. Okay, now generally we do see that from many of the reportings of such acts, when children report these acts, if it's generally seen, if it's an account of an act that was done I mean by someone against a male child, and he's telling what happened to him, he generally the act of removing the clothes does not occur because of the nature of the private parts of the male child. And imagine if this was the question, this factor of establishing a physical contact, it's so, if it's so important, then aren't we undermining the importance of the reason why this act was developed, and aren't we going just too far into the literal interpretation? These are some of the questions that the recent judgment by the Bombay High Court wants us to ask ourselves, and wants us to further ponder upon. And you know these are some of the things which also need a more clarification itself in the act, in the act itself. Now, these are some of the things that we really wish we'll be getting a clear idea upon in the coming future by the ways of interpretation by the Supreme Court itself. Let's just hope for the best in this regard. Now, the next and the last act, and one of the most important, not the last, I'm sorry, one of the most important acts which have been considered as a punishable offense in the POCSO Act, is that of sexual harassment. Now, this is a wide section, and it includes other acts, for example, undressing before a child, or making a child look flashing your private parts before a child, and making sounds which makes the child uncomfortable or gives him or her a hint of some sexual activity going on, etc., etc. Making a child see pornography, watch pornography without, even when he or she is not liking it, things like these, right? So these are the actions which are included in the definition of sexual harassment of the child, and these are punishable again. Now, the one of the other most important provisions in this regard is that of protection of children from being used for pornographic purposes. And by and far, it goes well for any child, be it a female child or be it a male child. And this has been included also because of the rise in this act of grooming to include children in the arena of pornography, and many a times children are also kidnapped and trafficked to be groomed in order so that they can be involved in child pornography, and even keeping and storing and circulating materials which include child pornography. Those are also punishable offenses. Separate punishable offenses are under the POCSO Act, as well as under the IT Act. So that's those are some of the provisions that we have in the POCSO Act itself. Now, the question of male sexual abuse, these arise. I'll give you a little bit of background. and why the question of non-gender neutrality was being raised, and how it has been done away with a very recent amendment in 2019. Now, we all are very well aware of the Katwa rape incident, and we know how it was revolted against, it was protested against, and that was a very sorry state of affair, a very unfortunate incident. And the age of the girl was very, very, very she was very young, right? She was just 8 years old, and that was a very unfortunate incident, and it was widely protested. And we saw that the president passed an ordinance at that time, and that ordinance that ordinance allowed the courts to administer death penalty to perpetrators who rape girls below the age of 12 years. Now, the question that was that arose, and that was pointed out by one of the filmmaker, and in her petition on change.org, and she said that now that we have this ordinance, but the thing that we are lacking over here is it's a twofold thing that we have to look upon, that this provision should be included in the POCSO provision itself. It should not we should not let it remain just an ordinance, and we should give it some space in the POCSO provisions. And second, that when the moment we include it in the POCSO provisions, we should make sure that it also includes the same punishment for the people who are raping a male child below the age of 12 years, right? So there should be no discrepancy regarding the punishment that a perpetrator will receive if he is raping a female child less than 12, aged less than 12 years, and if he is raping a male child aged less than 12 years. Now, the whole debate there was regarding how would we define rape then? Would we purely include it in the POCSO provisions, or should we let it just be included in the Indian Penal Code? Now, Menka Gandhi, she said that we are going to start a study. We are going to initiate a study in this regard, and we'll find out the reasons why we are in favor of making this provision of this provision that was in the ordinance. We are in the favor of making it gender neutral, and we'll administer a study. We'll start a study, and based on the results, we'll substantiate our decision of making this ordinance gender neutral. And then, Ishan, if you could please go to the next slide, and we could show some, statistics. So, thank you so much. So the study that was conducted, and that was also backed by some of the NCRB data, and we can see it's mentioned in the slide as well. There are 32,600 cases, that 608 cases that were reported in 2017, that included 39 and then we see these cases that were reported were included provisions of POCSO Act, and then we see the rise in the number of cases in 2018. But the thing that has to be seen over here is that out of the 21,605 child rapes that were recorded in 2018, so we see that we have 39,827 cases of including POCSO Act in 2018, which obviously includes all the cases of penetrative sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexual assault, and including, using children for the pornographic purposes. So this is a mix. A number of cases. Specifically, out of those 39,827 cases of child abuse, we had 21,605 cases of child rape, which means these are penetrative sexual assault, the first type of case that we discussed under POCSO provisions. And this penetrative sexual assault itself was the act, provision that we had to amend after looking at the study, as I also told. So we see out of these 21,401 rapes were that of girls, but the thing that has to be seen over here is that 204 cases were that of boys as well. Now, let's just for a moment not go into the difference of numbers that we have. Okay, anyone might say that okay, we have 21,401 rapes of girls, of child girls, and then we just have 204 cases of rapes of of male children, right? But the thing to be noted over here that there are a certain number of cases which involve boys who have been raped, right? So this is the thing that became clearer with the study and with the comparison of data, that male child abuse, penetrative sexual assault against male children is not something which is an imaginary concept. Now the data, it supported that these things do exist. Now we have to again take into consideration that these cases were only concentrated upon children, and we don't have any separate study in India which shows whether or not there are acts of penetrative sexual assault against adult men, but we are just concentrating ourselves in the if over the cases in which the victims are children. Okay, now the reason why we just have 204 cases of penetrative sexual assault against men, there are multiple factors over here. The one factor that I would like to present is that of patriarchy. Now, we say that patriarchy has hit women, patriarchy has hit women really hard. It's true, I do agree with that, but patriarchy, we need to agree over this, that patriarchy has hit men as well. And the way that it has hit men is that men, be it an adult man or a male child, they do not up with come up with the details of what happened with them because of the factors of shame and because of the factors of in the cases of a male child, the family tells them no, you're just not going to file a complaint, you're not going to tell anyone that this happened because our pride will be shattered, and because the classical dialogue mard ko dard nahi hota, and men cannot cry and men cannot be the victims. These things are a part of toxic masculinity that we instill into the brains of our sons at a very 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 early age, and this makes them miserable to even speak up against the wrong that has been done against the wrong that has been perpetrated against them. Now there are many cases, and we come across these cases regularly in the newspapers as well. We had a very recent case in which there was a school teacher who used to, and she was a female teacher who used to call a male her male students into the washroom and assault them by penetrating foreign sexual objects into their anus, and these things do exist. Right now we cannot be obsessed with the idea of perpetrator just being a man and excluding women from the area of being from the possibility of being a perpetrator. And secondly, we cannot say that if such crimes are committed against men, be it adult or child, they should not speak up against them, right? So just keeping apart the growing menace of false cases against men, the other thing that's also on the rise is that the crimes of sexual harassment against men are also on the rise. But the thing is that they are very less reported. We can see the difference in the number of cases that we have. It's 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 just hard to believe that there would only have been 204 boys who would have been raped. Many of them would not even have complained. It's getting easier for women to access the redressal mechanisms for sexual harassment and specifically penetrative sexual assault against them, but it's getting even more difficult for men to do so because of the multiple factors. Now even when there are many other factors, because it's also difficult to prove that. It's easier in the case of children, because the private parts are really tender at that age, and a medical examination could show that there was a forceful penetration in the anal region. But it gets even more difficult in the cases of adult, and these things are too complicated, and I really think there should be separate discussions on these, and elaborate discussions on this. But nevertheless, we do see that there have been evident NCRB data, and there have been other reports as well, which we'll see in the next slide. Ishan, if you could please skip to the next slide, and we'll see that not just this one NCRB data, and plus the study that was headed by the Ministry of Women and Children Affairs, but also there was a separate study conducted in the state of Kerala, and this is the state where we have from where we had many reports of male children also being abused by priests, male children being abused at schools, male children being abused by some of their own relatives, etc., etc. So because of the growing menace of the increasing cases of male child abuse, there was a study which was conducted in the state of Kerala, and it saw that the boys are victim of sexual abuse in 17% of the cases which involve POCSO provisions. Okay. Now, the thing that came out in detail in this study was that in many of these cases, several of such cases, the modesty of boys is outraged by women. And as I also gave you an example of a news which involved a headmaster, a school teacher calling the male children in the washroom and manipulating their private parts. There have been other cases in which there have been reported acts of punishment by the teachers. Sometimes some of them are women, in which the children, the male children, are told to strip naked and parade in the school ground as a punishment because some of the acts they did. And this does amount to the offense of outraging the modesty of that child. Right now, let's just ask ourselves this question: wouldn't our reaction be a bit different if the child who was told to strip and parade naked in the ground as a punishment was a female child? Right, our reactions would change. So why doesn't our reaction change for a male child? Wouldn't that male child feel ashamed just because he's a male? Isn't he doesn't does he lack the right to be ashamed of being of walking naked across the around the school in I mean in front of the public? Right, just a nature, just a gender of the child doesn't mean that our reactions towards the situation has to be different. So we need to react accordingly, we need to react in the similar fashion. And then the report went on to say that according to an analysis of the data on sexual abuse of children in the last 5 years, boys have been subjected to several sexual offenses by perpetrators. And then the report went on to list some of the acts. And in some of the acts, one of the acts that was also included was that the perpetrator asked them to touch their own private parts. So there were reported cases in which the male children, they gave an account of how their female teacher told them to grope their breasts, right? And all of these acts do amount to sexual these acts amount to sexual assault because of the definition that we have. So in these cases, generally we do see that the first reaction from the side of the female perpetrator is that I didn't do anything, your child was molesting me. Right now, the whole thing, the tables turn, and because of that shame, because of that inability to convince others. And people might say that the question that comes into our mind at the first instance itself is that person was just a child. How would he even do that? Right, you are an adult, you might have encouraged him to do that. But as our society is, we tend to be more compassionate towards women, and we tend to think that okay, she must be saying the right thing, and why would a woman say this for herself? Maybe the child was wrong. Maybe he just got to read or see some filthy film and was trying something wrong with his teacher, right? So this is our first reaction. But what are we leaving the child with? We are leaving the child with trauma. We are leaving the child with a lot of aggression, and we are just ignoring the fact that the POCSO provision itself, that we have the provisions in POCSO Act, the act itself is gender neutral, and we need to let that act be like that. We need to make it possible to let it be implemented in a gender neutral manner, and we should stop being focusing on just one uh, uh, um, uh, area of application of POCSO provisions in which the victims are female. Right. Now, that's exactly why there was a 2019 amendment, and the ordinance that was passed of allowing the courts to administer death penalty um, uh, to perpetrators who rape female child below the age of 12 years. It was extended to be included as a gender neutral provision, and it included not just rapes of girl child, but also rapes of a male child below the age of 12 years. Now, it's on the discretion of the court, but at least the amendment that we have at present was made a bit more gender neutral after the studies that were conducted. Okay. And we do have one last slide. Ishani, could you please go to that last slide, and we could see some more data on this regard. And that again was from the same study that was done in Kerala, and we will see some shocking numbers over here from the time period of 2015 to 2019. And again, I would repeat that this was for the one specific state of Kerala, because they did a very extensive study and a very elaborate study regarding the male child abuse, the situation of male child abuse. And we see that from 2015 to 2019 in Kerala, there were 13,184 cases that were registered under the POCSO, different provisions of POCSO Act. And as we had seen in the first slide as well, these different provisions also include using children for pornographic activities, and sexual harassment, sexual assault, as well as penetrative sexual assault. So then these figures, that is 13,184 cases, do not, it doesn't mean that they only are restricted to the one region of penetrative sexual assault, but these are by and far include all the other provisions under the POCSO Act. But out of these, a total number of cases of different natures of offences under the POCSO Act, 2,213 cases pertain to sexual abuse of 2,250 boys. Now, there were 2,213 cases of sexual abuse, but out of these 2,213 cases, 2,250 cases that were that which included boys. Now, out of the 13,000 cases, we had some cases which included sexual offences of which included the act of sexual offences, and out of this, specifically 2,250 cases included sexual offences against boys. Non-penetrative sexual assault. And then we have this final thing about that study, which was carried on in Kerala, and we came to know that 17% of the victims were below the age of 9 years, and 25% were from the age of 10 to 12 years, and the remaining were between the age of 13 to 14 years. So these were some of the statistics that I had from my side, and I wanted to, of course, I collected these statistics from the internet itself, and I just wanted to show it out to you, that this is the reason why we are over here discussing about this issue of male sexual abuse, sexual abuse of male children, in India, and why we need to talk about that. I think, Ishani, we can stop the screen sharing now. Thank you so much for that. So, that's the reason why we are discussing this whole situation. And now that we have seen that there are a number of and now that we have seen that there are a number of cases which involve sexual abuse against male children, we are in the position to discuss more about what we should actually be doing about the situation. Now, we do know that in the POCSO Act itself, we have victim compensation schemes, we have several provisions for the safeguarding of the victim. For example, when police men will take statements of the children of the victims, they have to not wear the uniform so that the child does not get frightened, etc., etc. There are provisions of rehabilitation and several other types of you know help and support to the victim. The thing over here that the gap that we have to bridge over here is that we need to acknowledge that men can very well be the victim. And now when I am using the term men, I'm not speaking for the adult men, but nevertheless I do believe that adult men can also be victims of sexual abuse and even penetrative sexual abuse. But now, as we have the a topic over here over us here, that's of male child abuse. Now when I'm using the term men, I want to address want us to understand that I'm speaking specifically for the male children. So the gap that we have to bridge over here is that we need to make ourselves more acceptable of we need to accept this fact more and more, that even male children can be abused, and there are several times when they will not speak up. So where do we have to act? We need to be more empathetic. We need to implement this act equal neutrally. And the provisions of compensation that we have for female children, we need to make sure that the same compensation are actually provided to the male children, not just in books, but it's actually done in practicality. And then we have to make sure that the same support is given to male children and male victims of sexual abuse. And that even as parents, we should understand that we should not say that, just don't speak about this because you are a male child and you have to grow up to be strong. You should stop crying and you should just emerge out of it, etc., etc. Would we tell the same things to our female children in the scenario that we are living in? I don't think so, because we are getting more and more empowered, and we are encouraging our girls to speak against the wrong that have been done to them and that are being done to them. So why not just encourage our men as well? So it all starts in at a very small age. And then if we just have these provisions, it's gender neutral provisions just restricted to the books, I don't think that we will be able to reduce the number. And then one thing that's also important to think about is the consequence of not taking these issues seriously. Now we do have these numbers which reflect a few cases of sexual abuse against male children, but we have to think about why are these numbers so few. Now we can't just say that these are the actual number of cases, because we do have the factors, many factors, because of which male children might not speak up, or parents of children would not let them complain against the women, complain against the perpetrator to the police, and thus we have the lesser numbers in front of us. So we have to think about all of this. We have to think about the consequences. Now if the child is bottling everything in bottling up everything inside him, he is being more prone to things like to issues such as disbelief against everyone out and large, disbelief against humanity, suffering from mental health issues. And we see that there has been an exponential rise in the cases of suicide. And specifically when we look at the suicide index, we see that the male suicide index is higher than the female suicide index. And the reason being that men have been taught since their very childhood itself that you have to project this idea of masculinity, which involves you not crying and which involves you not being able to be subjected to any type of harassment, violence, etc. One of the reasons why we male do not talk about the domestic violence that are perpetrated against them, right? And specifically, one of the reasons why we see so lesser number of male child abuse being reported than as compared to female child abuse. So this has severe consequences, and we see the increase in suicide rate. We see the increase in rates of mental health illness against men, specifically male children, right? So these are the reasons why we need to be more sensitive upon this lesser talked about area, male child abuse, in the POCSO Act. Of course, it's something which is very well included in the POCSO Act, but it's very less used, and it's that's exactly what we have to take care about. We have to raise awareness about this idea that men also can be the victims, and the perpetrator, the term perpetrator also has to be interpreted and defined gender neutrally. We have to stop being obsessed with the idea of only men being the perpetrators. So that's all that I had to discuss about this topic, that we were over here. We have been gathered over here to discuss, and yeah, over to you, Ishani.
Yeah, ma'am. There is one question in our chat box that is the reason behind the rape mentality, or the reason that the rape occurs is that there is the more use of internet, and there is more misuse of the internet in the thing that students starting watching the porn videos and the pornographies, and our government and court banned the pornographies in India, but still
I'm
the
sorry, Ishani, I lost you in the middle. Could you please continue from students watching pornography?
yeah, the thing is that the students started watching pornography over the internet, and they started misusing the internet. So, and our government and the court banned the pornography in India, but still now, by using the technology and the VPN, students can easily watch the pornography over the internet. So is there, the pornography is the reason behind the rape mentality, or is there something else that started this thing in the child's? And as we can see that small children's and the victims of the abuse are also males, and they are also the doers, and we can see in the juvenile act there are some of the males who do this, and they said that they watch it on the porn video, and that's why they repeat, and they think that they should repeat the things watch in the porn video.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So it's not always that it's just the porn. It's also see now the POCSO provisions, the POCSO Act does have specific provisions of stopping the children from being used, stopping the children. I mean, not letting the children be involved in the acts of pornography. Now, the reason being that the nature of the children are so such that they can be easily tricked into doing something which obviously will not be beneficial for them, even from the health perspective. But adult pornography, as far as the topic is concerned, and if you ask me from the perspective of human rights, even I think it's their choice if adults are getting involved in the acts of pornography, because they have this their own rationality, they have their own thinking capacity, and if they are getting involved in this act out of their own free will, I would rather look at it as a means of employment than look at it from a thing which is making people um, I mean, which is imbibing rape culture, to be honest. So the reason why I say this is because there are several ways through which we can stop our children from being exposed to pornography, and then they can choose to be exposed to pornography after a certain age, specifically after they are adults. And the reason being that there are many ways in which now we have parental control and things like that. I wouldn't agree that it adds to the rape culture per se, because you know, this I don't think this is an excuse, saying that I saw a pornographic video and I was trying to repeat it, and that's where the problem starts. Now you have to be aware of the law. You have to know that this is a punishable offense, and the acts shown in a pornographic video are acts in which two consenting adults enter into the act, and they're actually under a contract, and they're actually shooting a film, and that's not an act of rape. Now if a child goes and sees that and says that I went ahead and repeated the same act, now, I don't think how that would be a reasonable explanation of what he did if we are looking at it from the perspective, as you said, Juvenile Justice Act. And that's exactly why we need to dig deeper into it and even reassess our Juvenile Justice Act. Now, we are seeing even younger children who are committing these acts, and the reason is not just porn, it's many other reasons. Maybe they see their parents. Talk about women in that fashion, and maybe they think that this is something right, or maybe just maybe other factors. Maybe they have they are in the company of their friends who say that this act is correct. Maybe just we can just go and harass that woman, and it's super cool, let's just try this. There are multiple other factors and not just pornography which is adding to the rape culture. Now the second thing that you asked in your question is, now this is one case in which the perpetrators are children, and now this is the other case in which the victims are children. Now, when we look at the other case of victims being children, how I don't think there could be a reasonable explanation of pornography adding to the rape culture over here, because in any case involving children in porn is a punishable offense, not just in India but across the globe. Okay, now if anyone is circulating even I mean, I don't know, if an adult is looking at some pornographic material and is saying that I just wanted to do it with some child, I mean, that's I don't know how they would justify this by just saying that I watched porn and then I wanted to do this to a child. I mean, really, you really wanted to do that to a child? I don't know the nature of, I mean, the extent to which pornography could be held responsible for the increasing rape culture in India. I mean, I don't know, I don't think that's the only factor. There are so many other factors. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I
And
completely agree with your point, ma'am. And there is one more point in my mind is that when our government, um, majorly we can say the UP government of the Adityanath, he said that he will capture all the porn viewers and he will ban all the porn in their area. So is it possible in this era of technology that one can ban all these things over the net?
see, the problem over here is that the more you will want to ban that, the more people will start to find ways how to access porn. And I don't find any rationale in this thing that the UP government did. To be honest, not, I know people will judge me over here, but the only thing I'm speaking against this decision is because the more you'll try to ban this, the more people will find other ways to access this. And in doing so, the other things that they'll resort to will be involving other children, or maybe, no, see, if if the act of pornography, adult pornography, is banned, okay, in India, imagine a utopian scenario, then the lack of access to the pornographic material will lead to the making of new pornographic material. And now if adults will be knowing that this act is punishable, and it's banned, now who will be the people who will be left to be taken as actors? Now these people who will want more pornographic materials for their consumption will take children and make illegal pornographic films with them, and then circulate it amongst themselves. And you see, the problem will even grow worse. Now we have consensual adults entering into pornographic films. Now in that case, we'll have children being taken into these pornographic acts, because adults will then know that if we if we get into these acts, if we get into these films and people see our faces in that films, and as it's banned, then we'll also go into the jail. Now what will people do then? They'll just take children and make films and then consume those films, and that will be even a worse situation. So I don't find a rationale in even banning pornography, and it's just moral policing, to be honest. It's like, even even across the globe, the thing that is being told that we have to the thing that even in the area of pornography, the thing that's told that we have to stop is child pornography and not adult pornography. And the way UP police is acting, I'm sorry, UP government is acting, I don't know how well planned of a step this is, and how they'll stop the other repercussions of this. One of the repercussions that I said, that people will find more ways to access porn. People will now involve children in making new porn videos. So these are some of the things that might be a few of the repercussions of the stricto sensu ban that the UP government wants to
Yeah.
put across.
When the Supreme Court is confused over the topic that the consensual teen sex. So, consensual teen sex is a way of abusing both the male and the girl child, we can say.
I'm sorry, abusing.
The Supreme Court said that they are confused over the consensual
Hmm.
teen sex, and
Hmm.
the POSCO provisions are not intended to punish the teens for their consensual sex. So, is there anything bad in this provision of the consensual sex, because it will later on target the male and the girl child both?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Thank you for that question. So, the now we see that this age of 16 to 18, now that's the age in which we do have more cases of consensual teen sex, as was also noted by the Supreme Court. And the remark that they gave was with regard to this provision of statutory rape in the IPC. And now we also have many cases of false reporting of sexual harassment against men, when two teenagers, they have consensual sex, and then one of them refuses to marry them, and then they have this provision of rape in the cases in which the sex was consensual, but the consent was sought on the false promise of marriage. Now, in this regard, the Supreme Court said that, as we have been seeing the rise in the such cases. Now, the question that arises is: do we have to reconsider this this small age gap? Like, no, I mean. The people between the ages of 16 to 18 years. Now, if they get involved in a sexual act, and that sexual act is consensual, they are nevertheless not adults, right? And this will amount, maybe this will include other provisions of statutory rape and things like that. So should we, I mean, imagine if the perpetrator in that case is an adult, and the woman is someone who is below the age of 18 years and technically a child under the POCSO Act, or maybe if she is below the age of 16 years and there is consent. Okay, so these are the questions that are still not addressed. And then let's just think for a moment of the good and the bad sides of acknowledging that these things do exist. Now, imagine if there is an adult who is having consensual sex with, say, a woman who is of 15 years, and the woman can go ahead and say that, I mean, the girl, to be precise, who can go ahead and say, no, I had consensual sex. Now, imagine if the POCSO Act includes some provisions which says that maybe we can allow this if we can prove that there was consent. Now, this will this will be a little bit problematic, because due to the age of the girl herself, we can say that the consent might be tainted. Now, we have this teenager love, and we, to be honest, see a lot of heartbreaks in that time. And if even if we allow it, we'll give rise to more issues like pregnancy at an early age, which is again not healthy for a woman, for a girl, and we'll just give rise to many more issues. For example, imagine if the man doesn't marry, etc., etc. Now these are some of the issues which we cannot stop from happening. If it has to be happen, be it at any age, but why just increase the situations like this when we already have so many other situations to think about. Now other thing which might which might be on the rise over here is that maybe the man would tell the girl that um, I just take this case back. Tell them that you were involved in a consensual sexual act with me. I'll get acquitted, and then maybe I'll give you some money, and then you can just go away. Things like these things do happen. Now, if this does happen, then what will we be promoting? We'll be just allowing more women to resort to not speaking up against the wrong being done to them, and not letting them fight until the end. So maybe we can just rethink about it, and the Supreme Court might get us through with some guidelines in this regard, how to deal with consensual sexual intercourse amongst teens. Right.
Yeah, and I thought that topic this topic also, am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I thought that this topic opens the gate for the news more topics like talking on the pornography. Is it ban is good or not? And also we should talk about to moralize. We can't moralize the porn and we can't moralize the business of the pornography in India, but we can surely legalize that thing to collect the taxes upon the same. And I think that we should talk on this topic in our later session. Concluding this session now, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for conducting this amazing session with you, and the answers you gave to the students, I thought that they will help them a lot. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you.